Yakuza finger removal, yubitsume, or Yakuza finger removal, is a ritual performed to seek forgiveness after a member has wronged someone in their group. It involves amputating part of one's own little finger as a sincere sign of apology and remorse. This is considered one of the least painful punishments since it generally doesn't cause permanent pain or death, unlike some of the harsher punishments later in this list. Bastinado. Bastinado involves beating the soles of a person's feet with a light rod, knotted cord, or lash. Unlike other forms of flogging, its main aim is to cause pain rather than severe injury. However, if done excessively, it can leave the victim unable to walk. Despite the intense discomfort, it is not typically fatal. Pitch capping. This brutal punishment involves pouring hot pitch or tar into a paper cone, which is then pressed onto the victim's scalp. When the pitch cools and the cap is removed, it rips away skin and tissue, leaving lifelong scars. While not intended to kill, infections from this punishment often prove deadly. Elephant's foot, gungar. Used mainly in Asia, particularly India, this form of execution crushed victims with an elephant. There were two versions. A quick one where the victim's head was instantly crushed, causing immediate death, and a slow one where elephants were trained to trample limbs first, prolonging agony before finishing the execution. Poenaculae. In ancient Rome, those who murdered their father faced poenaculae, being sewn into a leather sack with a live dog, snake, monkey, and chicken, then thrown into water to drown. Roman decimation. When Roman military units were guilty of severe crimes like cowardice or mutiny, they underwent decimation. Groups of 10 soldiers were formed and lots were drawn. The soldier picking the shortest straw was killed by the others. This randomly assigned death served as a brutal form of discipline affecting all, regardless of individual guilt. Blowing from a gun. An execution where the condemned was tied to the mouth of a cannon, which was then fired, causing instant death. A 19th century English soldier described the aftermath. The victim's head would be blasted high into the air, arms thrown far, and legs falling below the cannon. Death was instantaneous, which is why this ranks lower on the list. Basil II's Blind March. After capturing 15,000 Bulgarian soldiers, Emperor Basil II ordered 99 of every 100 prisoners blinded, leaving one with one eye intact to lead the rest home. This horrific act reportedly caused the Bulgarian king to die from shock upon witnessing the massacre. Castor oil poop barrels. Forcing someone to drink massive amounts of castor oil caused painful diarrhea and loss of bowel control. The victim was then confined in a large barrel until they confessed, sometimes left to drown in their own waste if they refused. Immurement. A form of execution or lifelong imprisonment where a person was confined in a tight enclosed space, like behind a wall. As a death sentence, the victim starved to death. When used as imprisonment, they were occasionally fed. Rack. Victims were stretched on a wooden rack with limbs pulled in opposite directions, causing excruciating pain, dislocations, and torn ligaments. Mostly used to extract information, it could also be used to tear limbs off, leading to death. Tarring and feathering. A public humiliation and torture method where victims were stripped, coated with hot tar, then covered in feathers. This caused severe burns and permanent scarring, while also subjecting the victim to ridicule as they were paraded around like a giant walking chicken. Choke pear. A metal device inserted into the mouth or anus, which was then expanded to painfully stretch and tear the tissues beyond repair. Aztec live heart removal. During sacrifices to the sun god Huitzilopochtli, victims were placed on a stone altar, had their abdomens cut open with obsidian blades, and their still beating hearts ripped out to honor the deity. Heretic's fork. A metal collar with 2 sets of spikes positioned under the chin and on the chest, forcing the victim to hold their head upright. This caused severe discomfort, sleep deprivation, and slow piercing until the victim could no longer hold up their head. Rat's cup. Attributed to Emperor Nero, this involved tying a cup filled with starving rats to the victim's abdomen and heating it. The rats would burrow through the person's body to escape. In South America, a similar method called the rectoscope involved inserting rats into the victim's rectum. Catherine's wheel. The victim's limbs were tied to a large wheel and smashed with hammers or iron bars, breaking bones. The broken body was displayed on the wheel, often until death by starvation. Boiling alive. Victims were slowly lowered into boiling liquids like oil, causing agonizing burns as extremities were exposed first, followed by flesh and internal organs being cooked alive. In another variation, the liquid was heated gradually to boiling while the victim was immersed. Keel hauling, a maritime punishment where sailors were tied to a rope and dragged beneath the ship's keel. The ordeal often caused drowning, severe injuries from barnacles and sharp wood, and was repeated until death. Sawing. Victims were hung upside down to keep them conscious longer as their bodies were cut vertically in half from groin upwards. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. Used for high treason in medieval Britain, this gruesome punishment involved dragging the victim behind a horse, near hanging, mutilation, organ removal, beheading, and quartering. Body parts were displayed publicly to warn others. Glastration, a horrifying torture where a glass rod was inserted into an erect penis and then shattered inside, causing immense internal damage. Bamboo through the anus. A bamboo stalk was inserted into the victim's anus and left to grow inside, causing intense, unbearable pain until it emerged from the other side. Spanish donkey. The victim was forced to straddle a sharp, angled wooden device with weights attached to their feet, intensifying pressure and pain that often resulted in severe injury or dismemberment. Brazen bull. A metal bull statue was heated with a fire underneath while the victim was locked inside, slowly roasting them alive. Pipes amplified their screams to sound like a bull's roar, terrifying onlookers. Impalement. Victims were impaled on stakes in a way that caused prolonged torture. One variation required the victim to support their weight to avoid vital organs being pierced, creating a cycle of pain and exhaustion until death. The Judas chair, a pyramid-shaped seat, was another variant that slowly ripped the victim apart. Flaying. Skin was removed from a live victim, causing extreme pain and a slow death from shock or infection. Executioners often use boiling water or other methods to facilitate skin removal in a precise, torturous manner. Blood eagle. A brutal Viking ritual where the victim's ribs were severed from the spine and spread like wings while the lungs were pulled out, causing a slow, excruciating death. Ling Chi. Death by 1,000 cuts. A Chinese execution involving multiple deep cuts inflicted over time, avoiding fatal bleeding until the final stab to the heart. Some variations included tying the victim in nets and cutting skin exposed through holes or pouring mercury under peeled skin, intensifying pain and suffering. Scaphism. Considered one of the worst forms of execution, the condemned was placed between two boats or inside a hollowed one with limbs sticking out. They were force-fed milk and honey, which caused diarrhea and smeared on their body, attracting insects and rodents that would eat away at their flesh. This process was repeated daily, prolonging the agony for weeks. Rats often entered the victim's anus, and one man reportedly survived 17 days of this torment, covered in wasps and decaying flesh.